Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. It's Ukraine War news update for the 23rd of November 2023, first part thereof. Let's go to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them in the description to this video below. And we are back up to some pretty staggering numbers again. We've seen 2 or 3 days of low numbers, probably as a result of the weather, the impact the weather's having, and maybe that's stopping certain maneuvers on the front line. But those activities appear to have picked up yesterday because we have 1,130 personnel lost for the Russians. That's a huge number. If it wasn't for the day of 1,300 odd the other day, then that would be pretty much a record number or thereabouts. 20 tanks. That's a phenomenal amount of tanks to lose in a day. 36 armoured personnel vehicles and 33 artillery systems. These are huge numbers and present quite a challenge for the Russians, no doubt. Now, it's not to say there aren't Ukrainian losses as well, of course, but those are massive numbers. 3 multiple launch rocket systems, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems. This is just, a very bad day at the office, of course. 15 drones. I don't think they're from last night, from the night before. It's a relatively quiet night, I think, although there were reports of stuff happening in the air, but no ramifications of that as far as I can work out. 39 vehicles and fuel tanks is a high number in that category. So logistics still being hammered, and 2 pieces of special equipment. So that is, if you're pro-Ukrainian, that is very good for the Ukrainians. Now, even if you think those are grossly overstated numbers, you can take 30% off that and you've still got really problematic numbers. You've still got 14 tanks, you've still got 24 armored personnel vehicles and 11 artillery systems. 24 APVs and 22 artillery systems. That's taking a third off. That's 33% off those figures. They are still huge numbers. What does Andrew Perpetua have to say? So the mapper I refer to an awful lot, he compiles those figures on a daily basis. For those who don't know, I have to say this every day because newbies and whatnot. So he looks at all the socials, counts up what he can see. And yesterday we had a rare day where there was a greater number of Ukrainian losses and Russian losses. We're back to, I guess, a 2-to-1, maybe 1.5-to-1 ratio of Russian to Ukrainian losses here. Ukrainians lose a recovery vehicle, a boat, and then pretty standard stuff down the list. The Russians, on the other hand, have lost a Buk air defense system, a couple of surveillance and comms pieces of equipment, a number of tanks, high tank losses there. Ranging from T-64s up to T-80s and some unknown ones as well. Few bits of artillery and the usual sort of IFVs, APCs, civilian vehicles at the end there. So higher value losses for the Russians, although obviously the Ukrainians won't want to lose too many recovery vehicles as they're pretty useful. I guess activity has picked up again on the front line. Just a long old chat here about loss statistics. So Military Lab here talks about how, I'm not going to read it all, but has a bit of a rant against the Russians who claim the Ukrainians are losing so many, and then kick off about claims about them losing 10,000 in Avdiivka, and it's like, It is tough out there, and the Russians are definitely losing more than Ukrainians. What that ratio is, who knows? However, this was in response to Julian Rutke, who is, he's I think based in Germany, sometimes very critical of Ukrainians. People have varying opinions of him in his reporting, but nonetheless says the amount of killed Russian soldiers around Avdiivka is unique. Talked to a Ukrainian officer yesterday who told me the death ratio since early October is around 20-to-1 in favour of the Ukrainians. Quote, even better than in Bakhmut, he said, while admitting the Russians' advance at that cost. So this is what we keep talking about, or I keep talking about, which is, yes, the Russians are advancing around Avdiivka, and the Ukrainians are on a knife edge as far as whether they are going to lose that settlement or not. But at what cost to the Russians? The Russians are losing huge amounts of personnel and equipment in that area to the Ukrainians as they advance in these rather unsophisticated modes. And yeah, it's just causing them huge amounts of pain in so doing. I did report this yesterday, but just to remind you that the Ukrainians are using JDAMs. Trent Telenko says JDAMs ER with the extended range ones. This was the example. This was the one that hit in Novomayachka, just to the south of Novokakhovka in the Kherson Oblast near the Dnipro River. So it's good to see the Ukrainians using that. They need to play a lot of catch up because the Russians use their FAB 500 bombs, 250 bombs, lots of different sizes, 1,000, 3,000 even arguably. They are using those to great effect. The Ukrainians need to play catch up there. Here we have these bits of footage are 10 a penny, right? But it's interesting when you see, how they play some of these comms pieces of comms equipment. Here we have one just stuffed up a tree, and of course, as the leaves drop, they become more visible. And there we have a drone going and taking out that comms equipment that you will see then represented in this list from Andrew Perpetua, probably one of those up there, just comm equipment or surveillance equipment, that first one probably. So that is that. Here is another bit of drone footage. I'm not going to show the drone footage, but we have you got the spotted drone here, clearly looking at this guy taking a dump in the field. And, getting his toilet paper out, and then he finishes up and the drone hits him. And it just got me thinking, again, I've said this before, but if I was anywhere near the front line, I would just be in a state of anxiety the whole time. Because I think unless you are in a dugout, but safely in a dugout, and even then, you'll be seeing drones go in the doorways of dugouts, right? Unless you're safely in the depths of a dugout, I think you are just vulnerable the whole time. I'd be looking in the skies the whole time. I wouldn't feel safe anywhere outside, on top of a BMP-1, even in a truck, taking a dump in a field, moving, whatever you're doing outside, drones are there. There are drones everywhere. And I think the level of psychological anxiety that you'll be getting from this must be incredible. And then I reported that these were new vehicles that were being delivered to the Russians. They've got these molded rubber tracks rather than metal ones. First documented loss has now been seen of the Russian Platsun SN tracked all-terrain vehicle. I received the first batch of these back in October, and here we can see one somewhat worse for wear. Although, just having a look at it, it's probably just a lick of paint, but a T-cut on the back, and I reckon that's good to go. So, yeah, a couple of days, and that'll be up and running. But otherwise, it's, the first one of those that we've seen lost. Right, moving on to distant strikes, and really relatively quiet night. Aerial bombs probably fired on Kupiansk and nearby villages in Kharkiv region suggest Ukraine's monitoring. But you could probably say that about the whole of the front line. I think those aerial bombs, as I've just been saying, are a huge problem for the Ukrainians. Right, Russian media report that an explosion occurred overnight near a substation in the city of Litkarino, Moscow region. A fire started afterwards, and the lights went out in several parts of the district. I always find it interesting, the idea of one person says a city, another person says in a village. We've had these city conversations a number of times before. So an unexplained explosions at an electricity substation. Whether that's been hit by a Ukrainian drone or is a genuine, short circuit, as is claimed by the officials, I don't know, but useful for the Ukrainians. And then finally, explosions heard in Novofedorivka that's this morning in temporarily occupied Crimea. Some machine gun rounds are also heard. Usually when you hear machine guns being shot, it means that the drones are in the air, low flying, sort of relatively slow drones that people think they can shoot down and often can with small arms fire. So the Ukrainians giving some attention to Crimea there. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces, it's worth noting again that the weather is having an impact. This is a Ukrainian trench. Just gives you a sense of what the weather's doing. Oh, do you know, I thought he might just be having a chat about his coffee. But no, it was just some completely unnecessary music. Excellent. Anyway, as you can see there, quite a bit of snow. Looks rather lovely if it wasn't a trench in the middle of a war. Talking about conditions, here's a bit of Tokyo drift, or in this case, somewhere in Russia. Now, I'm showing you this because it looks like it's a military vehicle that's doing the drifting here. And goodness me. So it just goes right, starts going around a corner, and then the guy looks behind him because, oh my goodness, he's about to be taken out by another skidding Lada. And then look at that big old truck. Oh dear, bosh. And it's gone. Oh. Fat. It'd be nice if they were happy about that. Yeah, amazing, awesome. Right, now talking about these sort of snowy, tough conditions. Chris O'Wiki here, and I'm sorry about that rather horrific image there, but with the onset of winter in Ukraine, ill-equipped, mobilized Russians are appealing to the governors of their home regions for assistance in dealing with the cold and plague of mice. In response, relatives and governors are sending them cold clothes and badger fat. Okay, Russian soldiers are turning to social media pages of many Russian regional governors after the Russian army has failed once again to supply its troops with warm clothes and fuel for winter. So there have been questions to me on a regular basis about whether the allied nations have been supplying the Ukrainian army and troops with winter gear, and there has been a lot of winter gear sent. UK were the last to announce, but a bunch of nations have been given that and did last year. Particularly those used to it, like the Canadians and the Nordic Baltic states. Nonetheless, the Russians are, it appears, struggling this year again, as they did, I gather, last year. So mobilized men from Samara write that they need gloves, warm socks, thermal underwear and heaters. Quote, there are only 13 of us left. We are sitting in the trenches freezing. One writes, I mean, just comments like that tell you quite a lot when you do a little bit of inference there, which is that, okay, you have suffered huge numbers of casualties. There are only 13 of us left. And then you can talk about their conditions. Others from Primorye complain that they have no fuel for the generators they use on the front line and have to buy it from local people at their own expense. One man writes that he bought gasoline from local firefighters, presumably pilfered from official supplies. Quote, my husband says that they use their savings to buy gasoline for generators and take it to the guys on the front line so they can have light there, says one wife. I mean, again, it's not good for the Russians here. Due to unharvested crops in the war zone, mice are everywhere in the trenches. A relative says that her brother cannot sleep because they, quote, get into his ears, nose and mouth. They chew on everything they have. Cats are of little use in combating them. So here's a bit of footage from another OSINT technical, or from an OSINT technical piece here. Like, just look at that number of rats. Look at all of those rats, and that's his lodging there. Not rats, mice. Just literally in there, in that one small confined space, dozens and dozens of mice. That's a real challenge, of course. Anyway, what is said then by Chris Owicki, relatives have suggested various folk remedies. One advises half filling a bucket of water to tempt the mice to climb in and drown. Others recommend burning pieces of felt or even burning dead rodents to drive them away with the smell. Some governors have responded with assistance. Sergei Nosov, the governor of the Magadan region, has sent coal to the front line to supply the soldiers stoves and promises they'll get regular deliveries. Other less conventional ways of dealing with the winter temperatures have been suggested. One relative asks if badger fat can be sent to the front line, as smearing it on the body is supposed to be a good way of keeping out the cold. However, relatives complain that the humanitarian aid parcels they send are not being received at the front line, almost certainly due to theft by those in the supply chain. This has been a common complaint on the Russian side throughout the war in Ukraine. One relative writes that they collected clothes and passed them on to a commander via reliable volunteers. Quote, the volunteers returned and said that they had handed everything over to the company commander. A week passed, no one handed anything over to anyone. So it gets to the commander, and then that's the end of all that stuff. Right. This is a Status 6 piece quoting from the Wall Street Journal. It's not a piece, it's them just quoting from the Wall Street Journal. Ukrainian frontline units are commonly 20 to 40% below full strength, said Ihor Romanenko, a military analyst and retired Ukrainian lieutenant general. Because of the shortage of infantry, those remaining are tired, he said. There's little scope for rest or rotation. This is the same for both sides. I would claim it's worse for the Russians, but it's still not great for the Ukrainians. As you can imagine, you are fighting a war where your country has been invaded. It's going to be very difficult to give your troops enough time for suitable leave. It's just there aren't enough troops. They need to do a mass mobilization, but obviously they don't want to do that. Neither side wants to do that, really. And as a result, people are working harder and longer and not getting the rotation that their bodies and minds really, really need. And they have units that are under strength, and this is being reported across the board, as I say, for both sides. Ukraine's commander-in-chief Zaluzhny takes part in a Ramstein format meeting as Germany, the Netherlands and others pledge significant military aid, forming a new coalition to enhance Ukraine's defences. And he said, the quote that's going around, I briefed our partners in detail on the situation on the battlefield. I noted that the situation at the front is complicated but controlled. The armed forces of Ukraine continue to conduct defensive and offensive operations. I reported on Russian actions, threats, and their likely plans for the near future. Goodness me, I'd love to listen to what he said there. And stuff coming out of that. We'll talk about that later in the military aid segment of my next video, although it looks like I'll have to do 2 videos. There's too much on the military aid and too much on the geopolitics segment. It will be a massive video, so I'm going to split that into 2. Finally, here we have the sphere of civil aviation of Russia is on the verge of collapse. The main directorate of intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine reports the main directorate has managed to obtain secret documents indicating the Russian aircraft are in extremely bad condition due to sanctions. In January 2023, 185 aircraft accidents were recorded in Russian civil aviation. Over 9 months, 150 cases of technical failures of aircraft were documented. Russians repair their aircraft in Iran without proper certification. That's an interesting nugget there, that they're actually taking civil aviation aircraft to Iran to get fixed, but then they won't get certified, which means flying them internationally might be a problem, insurance, so on and so forth. So that is an interesting little nugget there. We saw that Ural Airlines reported yesterday, was it, that that's still in a field where it sort of crash landed, in emergency land. I don't know how long ago, months ago, and it's still there now, hasn't been taken away. Just, you look at little indicators to see how the Russian economy is doing, and the civil aviation industry is a good example of how precarious I think the economy is, given that they can't get the spare parts they need. They can't do the maintenance. That's going to affect how often they fly, how much they're flying, getting people around. It's just, as I say, another indicator. Right, I'm just going to refer you to a great comment from Art here, just to finish. This is a bit of housekeeping. I know so many of you have been saying YouTube are deleting my comments. YouTube have shadow banned me or banned me for a day or whatever. All these things that YouTube are doing is nothing to do with me, by the way, just to let you know. I haven't banned anyone since I banned Clive Engel about 2 weeks ago for being overtly personal in his attacks on me. I'm like, yeah, you can do one, and it's disinformation, but it's not me, right? This is also being reported by a number of YouTube channels. So just hear our out here because it's good stuff. Jonathan, I expect that due to your heavy schedule, you may have missed my fifth to last comment. Yep, I can't get a chance to read them all. So he said, some in our community have complained about their comments being deleted. I found this article explains the problem from PC Magazine Australia, December the 14th, 2022. Abusive comments on YouTube will now trigger warnings and 24-hour timeout. Quote, anyone posting a comment that violates the YouTube community guidelines should now expect their comment to be removed, but also receive a warning. If that same user continues to post such comments, YouTube will issue them with a timeout lasting up to a period of 24 hours during which they can't comment. Now, the question is, what triggers YouTube? And the answer is almost certainly quite a lot. So the YouTube guidelines cover naughty and hate language. However, in the context covered by this channel, many words about death, destruction appear to be flagged as well. Examples: killed, shooting, guns, wounded, Russian military, etc. YouTube, and I can't talk to whether that's definitely correct. This is what Art says, and I presume this is the case. What YouTube algorithm does warn the commenter of a pending timeout with a red returned error message under their comment. A related issue is being timed out for spamming. This is where a commenter copy and paste text, especially links, into their comments. This is exacerbated if the comment containing disallowed words is deleted and the commenter repeatedly tries to post their comment. This timeout comes with a message box telling the commenter they thought to be spamming and the duration of the timeout counting down from 24 hours. A workaround I found is to place a space before or after the pasted text. The upshot is simply to avoid such words to begin with. Maybe a list of substitute words like the above examples could be provided to help our community avoid being timed out, or people could help compile a list by providing their comments examples of disallowed words. I hope this helps. P.S. Georgie of Ukraine Matters in his last video mentioned the same issue happening with his viewers. So this isn't specific to my channel, but it is a problem. If anyone can find out what a list of trigger words, what the list might be, please let us know. Put it in maybe the Discord server. Check the Discord server link out below and join the community at Discord. That might be a useful place to put stuff like that. Anyway, I thought that might be useful. Thank you for watching. Please take care. Like, subscribe, and share. And I'll speak to you soon.